So good evening, everyone. Yeah, good evening. Like Rashawn said, I'm a graduate student at Troy University. I'm also a graduate assistant in the Center for National Programs, and I'm doing a virtual internship with Education USA Kazakhstan. Today, I'll be presenting about writing or preparing an effective CV for graduate school. So just to begin, why you need to submit a CV to graduate school. Well, obviously, it's going to be part of the graduate school admission process, along with your reference letters, personal statement, transcripts. CVs are going to help create an academic identity for yourself. So they're going to display your academic accomplishments. Something that's really good about the CV, even compared to the resume, is it gives you a lot of breathing room to go into a little bit more detail about your academic accomplishments and describe a little bit more and include more things. CVs are typically going to be 2 to 4 pages long for people who just finished their bachelor's by applying for their master's. And don't worry if your CV is on the short side of that, so only 2 pages long. You don't need to worry about that. It doesn't need to discourage you from applying. It's going to showcase the admissions committee one's qualifications. The point of your whole application, including your personal statement, reference letter, is to persuade the school to accept you. So that's what your CV is going to help accomplish. It's going to help accomplish this by showcasing experience and skills not displayed in other parts of your admission process, your admission materials. For example, your personal statement might only talk about one event, skill, or experience you had, while the CV will talk about a few of these skills and experiences. So some of the sections to include, and like Rashawn said, I have some examples I'm going to go over later that shows these sections on paper and what they look like and what they contain, the content. The first one being like your profile overview. It's kind of like what it sounds like, summary of the CV and your academic interest. Education. This is most likely going to be your most relevant, important, largest section. You're going to contain, it's going to contain like the bachelor's degree or higher. The exceptions to this will be if you study abroad in high school. That will be something really great to put on there. And you can put that under the study abroad section. So if you study abroad, that automatically increases your chances of being accepted into school. Also, just put in there key classes you've taken. By the word key, I mean like really advanced classes that are specific to the program you're applying for, your major. Include your major and your minor. Also, if you completed a thesis, include it. This is something I picked up on when I looked at a Kazakh, another student's CV, is that they did a thesis during their undergrad. This is something we don't usually do in the United States. So if you did, this is definitely going to give you a competitive advantage against other, domestic American applicants, because they probably don't have this experience. When you include your thesis, include what it's about, and even the advisor would be helpful. GPA is optional. I put optional in here because it's totally up to you. If you feel like it's high enough, and if it is high enough, you can include it. But if you do not include it, it's not a big deal because you are going to be submitting your transcripts. So they will know, the graduate school will know what your overall GPA would be. Experience. The experience section is also going to be a large section, or very important section to have. It can be kind of divided up into 3 sections, include like the teaching experience, professional experience, and research experience. It's very important to have these 3 sections, and it's okay if you don't have all 3 of them. If you're wondering what to add or take away from these sections, always ask yourself, did this experience, this skill contribute to me being a good graduate student? If your answer is no, it's and it really shouldn't be there, because the point of the CV is to convince the reader, the admissions committee, to accept you. And by doing, the way to do that is telling them that you're going to be a good graduate student, because they're investing in you. So some more sections to include: honors and awards from undergraduate experience and beyond. But it's okay if you've done something, I guess, miraculous, or if you volunteered, I guess, since you were young, if you want to put that on there, or you've got something on honors and awards, sorry. But also include maybe a description about the honors and awards. Being in Kazakhstan, you might have received something that we're not familiar with in the United States, that the admissions committee is not familiar with. So make sure you kind of describe, what that is if it's needed. Same thing with volunteer work. Adding some, I guess, description, kind of clarifying what this volunteer work was. So we're not the admissions committee is not really asking questions to kind of figure out what this is. Next, skills. This will be a very large, relevant section, especially for applying to graduate school. And you want to include skills that will contribute to being a good graduate student, specifically skills related to the program. And what I mean by this is not just including that you're a hard worker, that you can multitask very well. Include things like that you are fluent in, let's say, Microsoft Office, that you are good with different software or programs. Being very specific on what skills that you're good at, and these skills that relate to the program. For international students, it's a great opportunity to showcase language skills. I'm just going to go out on a limb in saying that I'm probably the only one in this Zoom session that speaks just one language. So you're definitely going to have a competitive advantage when it comes to this. Being bilingual, trilingual, that's definitely an advantage, not just when applying to grad school, but getting a job beyond that. And that's something graduate schools build their reputation on, is if their graduates can find work after they graduate, and especially into the field that they majored in. I thought about telling a joke. There's kind of a saying that goes, if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual, 2 languages, you're bilingual, and if you only speak 1 language, you're known as an American. And I think that tends to be the case. Memberships. You want to include your memberships related to your academic program. In my case, I'm in the counseling, Masters of Counseling. So I would include, I'm a member of the American Counseling Association. So things like this. Also, if it's a membership organization just specifically to Kazakhstan, maybe add a description of what this organization is, kind of what it does. Because we may not, people over here, the admissions committee may not be familiar with it. If you're a leader in these organizations, you can list what you did and ask a quantifiable and have a quantifiable description. What I mean by this is maybe putting what you did and how many of that you did. I will go over kind of a sample later to give you a better understanding of what I just said. Lastly, references. So you want to include your academic and professional references. Unfortunately, you can't include like friends and family because they'll be biased. And it's great to include references that are different from maybe the people who are writing your recommendation letters. I think it just showcases a wider array of people who are willing to, so to speak, like go to bat for you, put in a good word for you. But if they are the same people, it's not a large issue. And lastly, you want to make sure to present these sections from most to least relevant. So like I spoke, like your education is going to be the most relevant. So you most likely want that to come first. then you'll go to probably experience, and then so on. So just some more advice. Focus on academic experiences and professional experiences more than your personal experiences. Your personal experiences are going to be something you talk more about maybe in the interview you have with the graduate school, or even your personal statement. Content in each section should be related to the major. Like I mentioned earlier, ask yourself, will this skill experience help me be a successful graduate student? That's what you want the graduate school, the person looking at your CV, to take away from going over your CV. Also include short and concise descriptions of duties performed and accomplished. You can do this by using bullet points when you're describing your experiences, your skills, and use of technical terms. What I mean by technical terms is like professional jargon, words that are, I guess, used in that industry, that program. I have an example of this later in the template I'll show you. And use of quantifiable descriptions. Quantifiable descriptions, what I mean by this is something that can be measured. So the use of numbers, instead of saying I taught kids math and science, maybe you could say taught 30 kids math and science every 2 weeks, every day, something along that extent. Use a variety of action verbs. So do not continue to start every description with the same verb. This is a good tip, not just for writing a CV, but any type of academic writing. When you're applying for graduate school, like writing your personal statement, interest statement, and when you begin graduate school, using synonyms. And make sure to start every description with the verb rather than a pronoun. So instead of saying like I taught, I organized, I plan, say planned, organized, and so on, because they know it's you who did these things. And also have a qualified professional review your CV. Having someone review your CV might catch things that you didn't notice. Having a fresh pair of eyes to see your CV, because you know what you want to say, but do other people know what you want to say? Also, and having a qualified professional, someone in like an undergraduate professor or someone like a professional in that major review your CV, because they're going to kind of know what to look for, how you can reword things, how you can format things a little bit better, because they've probably been in the same shoes as you, so they can probably empathize and help you. So just some common things to avoid. Hopefully you all know to avoid grammatical errors. That's why it's so important to have someone review your CV, review, because once you submit it, you're not going to get a second chance. Grammatical errors will tell the selection committee that you're not qualified. It's going to showcase that you didn't put in a lot of effort into it, because if you have a simple spelling mistake. Also, something I've noticed is make sure you have consistent use of the past, present, and future tenses when you're putting together your CV. If you had an experience in the past, make sure you use past tense. If you're one still ongoing, make sure you use the present tense. Inconsistent formatting and fonts. Inconsistent formatting will distract the reader and be considered unprofessional. I'll kind of show an example of this towards the end of the presentation. Race, religion, ethnicity, etc. You don't need to include these into your CV. They have no bearing over whether or not you will be a good graduate student. So you don't need to include them. Also, the United States has very strict, I guess, hiring employment laws that I guess prohibit the rejecting or accepting candidates over these credentials. So a lot of universities, companies can just avoid the CV altogether to avoid any legal trouble. So there's not really a lawsuit to say, well, they didn't hire me because I was, African American, Native American, so on. Lastly, non-traditional colors. When it comes to putting together your CV, being traditional is best. So, don't use pink, green, blue, purple, any of these colors. So here's my first sample to show you all. I pulled up sample and I've kind of commented on it, what take away from each of these sections to give you a better idea what my advice looks like on paper. So to begin, let's see if I can lose. Can you see my laser?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So to begin, they have their personal information up top, like every CV is going to have. This is appropriate information. So, they don't include like how old they are, what ethnicity group, race, any of those things. I would want to mention that having the address is not important, but including a phone number and email, those are more important things to include. The most important would be including the email and make sure it's appropriate email. What I mean by this is that it's from a, I guess, professional source. So let's say instead of using some little bitty website, using something that's well known, maybe Gmail's okay. In my case, I've always had my university email address on there because that's more professional. Just make sure that you're going to have permission to, or you're going to still be able to use that email when you apply for graduate school. Next, and something I want to mention too, the phone number, it's likely that the admissions committee is not going to call you over the phone, especially being overseas. But make sure, something just to do for future references when you're applying for jobs and everything, is make sure you check your voicemail box on your phone to make sure that it's professional and that you have one set up. So to continue, profile section, a section to concisely summarize your objective and sell yourself. This person added what their research interests are. So you could add this if you're applying for a computer science master's program, PhD program. Include that you're interested in certain part of computer science. So next, begin with the most relevant information. This will most likely be your education. This person included where they got their undergraduate, so bachelor's of art in art history. They included, where this was at, what city, what they minored in, and their GPA. Under here, you could put your thesis, if you did a thesis, what your thesis was about, and even your thesis advisor. Next, like I mentioned earlier, instead of using a general section heading like experience, they used teaching experience. So to continue, they also had a section for art exhibitions. You might not be an art major, so in your case, this could be like presentations you've done, academic presentations. For example, I would include this presentation I'm doing now on my CV. It's related to my major. It's an academic presentation. As you see in the description here, they used a variety of action verbs. So like planned, arranged, curated, even like organized. All these words, could mean the same thing, but they're different words. So make sure the use of synonyms. Also, use of technical terms. They put in curated. Curated is a word I've never heard used outside of the art community. Something very specific to the program. It's kind of sound like, so it sounds like you know what you're talking about. Also, they use concise one-line descriptions. None of these descriptions are over one line. Very to the point. The admissions committee is going to have to review a lot of CVs, so it's good that you can go right to the point, and they don't have to read a lot to find out what you're talking about. Use of correct tense. For example, they completed these activities in 2016. They used the past tense when talking about what they did. Use of bullet points. This is a great way to format on your CV. And descriptions showcased what was accomplished. So not just saying what they did when they did these experiences. Also, something I want to mention is when you have these sections like art exhibitions, honors and awards, make sure then you list your the experiences you had in reverse chronological order. So what this means is the most recent to the one that's farthest back. So you're going back in time the farther you go down. For example, December 2016, March 2016, and then September 2012. Next, skills. Like I mentioned, this person didn't include anything about like that they're hardworking, they're good at multitasking. That's something that your reference letters, recommendation letters are going to talk about. They might include. So they included stuff like Microsoft Office, Adobe Photoshop, and InDesign. Something that's related, skills that are related to being an art major, an artist. I put that these would be really helpful for STEM majors because I could just think of, it was really easy to think of specific skills and software and things to help STEM majors. And obviously they put language skills. They put fluent in Spanish, intermediate Italian. This person was interested in Italian, I guess, art. So obviously it's really good that they're intermediate in Italian. This is going to be great for you to add, put Russian or Kazakh and or English. Unfortunately, in my case, I won't really put anything because I only speak English, unfortunately. So next on here on memberships, they put memberships that are related to their major, Hollywood Arts Council, California Alliance for Arts Education. These are related to the major, and there's not really any explanation needed for these, especially, she's applying to university in the United States because everyone's going to be familiar with these. But in other international students' cases, you might need to add a description of what these organizations are. So next here on the references, this is a simple just reference template that I got from Microsoft Word. Include appropriate information up top. Avoid personal information like race, religion, ethnicity, things of that. The street address is not very important, but making sure you have a valid email is going to be most important. I do recommend checking, making sure your telephone has a good, your voicemail set up. It's most likely they're not going to call you, but just in case that you're prepared. It's always best to be prepared. Also, something I picked up, instead of having your title like this, if you do submit a reference page, it's having it in the same format as a CV. As you might remember earlier, the personal information was centered. So using that same format, like I mentioned earlier, not using a consistent format, that would be really helpful. Make your CV look more professional. Next, 3 references is going to be standard, appropriate information, and unfortunately, you can't use anyone like your mom, dad, and uncle. So another sample I had, just to kind of give you more experience with a little different format and how the advice and sections that I told you about, how they fit in the CV. So like I mentioned earlier, they included appropriate and reliable information. They add, I guess, University of Iowa. That's their university where they did undergrad, rather than some little known or unprofessional email address. Also, the username, it looks, it's their initials and their last name. That's a lot more professional than using some nickname or something very derogatory. That's actually an issue that admissions committees have had, is where the people, when they submit their application, they include their email, and their email is very unprofessional. That's an automatic no from the university. They don't want that type of they don't want people like that really associated with them, especially for graduate school. Graduate school is very professional and is looked at as a job. So they began with their most relevant section, which is education. And they use for include teaching experience. The description showcases ability to be a successful graduate student. So tutor students in multidisciplinary areas to improve organization and arguments in writing. This is really related to being a successful graduate student. So obviously it's going to be included. The admissions committee is going to look at this, and they're going to take, in their mind, they're going to take away that this person's qualified to be in our program. Next, chronological order, what's most recent to the farthest back. So professional experience, they use quantifiable terms. That's a really difficult word for me to pronounce for some reason. So like they used edited arts and culture sections of the biweekly publication. So giving something that can be measured. How often did they do this? For example, this person could have said, instead of just taught students, taught how many students. Something that gives an exact number that can be measured is looked very favorably on your CV. Next, they include professional experience last under the experience section, because it is less related than like your teaching and your research experience. Consistent use of formatting and easy to read font. What I mean by this is, for example, the section professional experience is all bolded, it's all capitalized, and each section has the same. They're all bolded, all capitalized. So make sure you stick with this formatting, consistent use. Easy to read font. Everything in here can be made out. Nothing is like cursive, anything like that. Everything can be made out and can be read what it said. And lastly, they had a section that they included that's not a separate sheet. Their references, 3 references. I would recommend when you submit your CV, if they ask you to submit your references and your CV separately, you don't need to include your references on your CV. But if they don't ask, you can include them. So I'm big on, I guess, resources. They're, very helpful. I think to give you the tools to be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish is the most important thing. These are some resources that I found that would be very helpful even when I was putting together the presentation. Gograd.org. Going to be templates, kind of blogs about going to graduate school in all aspects, not just the CV. overleaf.com. It's going to be some templates on putting together your CV. Microsoft Word, that's where I got the reference template from. It has a reference template on there for CV. Wordvice.com, that's one I'm going to come back to that I found to be the most helpful. And I was going to show you all that. Purdue Owl, they have some great advice about preparing your CV. And that's just a website to use even when you start graduate school. They have a lot of academic writing information on there. Prep Scholar have examples of how to write a good resume and CV, and resume.now.com, it's going to have some templates on there as well. And let me see if I can open Wordvice and show you all. So are you all able to see what the wordvice.com?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so wordvice.com, I mean, they have resources for the mission resources for undergrad, graduate, resume or CV, scholarships, even in videos. What I looked at was how to write a flawless CV for graduate school. They have about like a 7-minute video here that gives you, I guess, 5 tips. And if you scroll down, you know, they're going to kind of break down kind of everything I went over during this presentation. Even the template, you know, they're going to education section, they're going to talk about what to include, teaching experience, all these things. I think this is going to be a really helpful resource for you all to use. Unfortunately, I didn't know about it when I applied to graduate school, but I definitely would have taken advantage of it if I did. So I highly recommend using this resource. This is what I found most helpful. And a lot of videos like this are going to be posted on YouTube to watch. And also here they have I guess a template example CV to as a PDF you can open, and kind of then you can use that same formatting when you prepare your own CV. So with that said, do y'all have any questions for me about applying to graduate school, or who I am, how did I get accepted, any part of the process? I'll be happy to answer. And I would be more than happy to give you my my email, so you can reach out to me if you have any questions about the process.
I think that we actually have one question.
Okay.
Do you see questions in the chat?
So, yeah, let me. Should I include? Yeah. It's best. I mean, to have the most relevant information first. It's most likely going to be, you know, your education and your experience. And it's okay if it doesn't all fit into one page. I mean, that's something about a different, like that differentiates a CV. It's okay if it's over 1 or 2 pages. And you don't want to, you know, cram things together. You want things spaced out enough where when the admissions committee looks at your CV, they can better make things out because they're not all close together. For example, like when I do my essays, I have to do them in, I guess, double space, which is like APA format. So it's better to, it's easier to read. And, have your sections divided into, there's your profile, education, experience. And then under there, you can divide further into, undergrad, master's, PhD, things like that. Does that answer the question?
I actually have a question. Maybe some other students have the same one. So there are like 3 references. But students also submit like their recommendation letters, right? So these 3 references, should they be different, like different people, or it's okay to have the same people?
Yeah, I mean, good question. That's something I talked to the coordinator of the career services at Troy University about. They're okay if they're the same. I think it would showcase. I mean, I don't think it'll decrease your chances of being accepted. But if you did have maybe different people doing it, I think it just speaks more, I guess, more about you, that you have more willing people to, you have more people willing to put in a good word for you. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I just wanted to ask students, like participants, have you noticed that after reading these CVs, you could actually understand what these people were doing? Like, you have never met these people, but you could actually understand, like, you could learn more about their experience, and you didn't even need anyone to explain.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah, for me, it's always, for everything, it's more helpful to look at an example. It's hard to just start your CV from scratch. Just start putting things on paper. So it's easy to see, kind of how another person, how they formatted things, what they did, and even kind of compare, well, how does my what I did line up to what they did? It's very helpful. So I would recommend, even if you have maybe a friend, family member who's goes to graduate school, have a look at their CV and see how they formatted things, how they spoke about different skills, qualities they had.
Maybe any other questions? Usually in Kazakhstan, when we write CVs or resumes, we have section about like my skills and qualities, and people write like, "Oh, I'm so like responsible, reliable, hardworking, and so on." Is it something that people do in the United States or not?
No, that's something I talked to my even the coordinator of the career services about here. A lot of times, internationals, their CVs tend to contain more things like that. And that's not always the case. That would be the case, I think, if maybe you're preparing a resume or CV for a job or something. But that's something you're going to display in the interview, or your reference letters are going to speak about that, your work ethic, your personal statements going to talk about. So that shouldn't be on the CV. And besides, if you have a lot of experiences, you list and what you did, like quantifiable, like I taught maybe 30 students. every week, every day, I think that person's going to leave from your CV thinking, oh, this person's hardworking, has a good work ethic. So there's no need to list that.
So it's good to show like specific examples, show numbers, show your results from the work you have
Yeah.
done, right?
Mhm.
And questions, should I include social media account in my CV?
That's a really good question. If you're going to include any social media account, I think LinkedIn would be the best. I think that's the most professional social media account, but it's not needed. And also, it's not uncommon for people. It's usually when applying for jobs to look at social media accounts of applicants. And that just goes not just for applying for graduate school, but when you further move along with your career, make sure you're careful what you post on there, and what pictures and everything is on your social media.
Do we need to include our hard skills in CV, like Excel, Bloomberg Terminal, etc.?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. That's kind of what I was talking about. Not including just like hardworking, characteristics like that, but including Excel is definitely a good one. Any computer skills definitely help you.
Yeah, because this stuff is actually something that is specific again, and it really shows what you can do. And it's not like subjective.
Yeah.
It's
And if you list your,
yeah.
like, to go back to the question earlier, I mean, if you list, like you said, if you list those skills and experiences, that person who's ever looking at your CV, you don't need to tell them that you're hardworking. They're automatically going to take that away from looking at it or reading your personal statement. The same thing goes with the other personal statement reference letters. They're automatically going to take that away.
Yeah. Any other questions? I was watching one video, and it was like why international students don't get admitted. Like some reasons, and one of them was lost in translation. It's like people do not really understand what you are doing. So it's really important to be as clear as possible, as specific as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. So I would highly recommend. I mean, even I can look over it. Having someone look over it, who may have a really good English ability, that would definitely help. And like I said, you want your descriptions very concise and short, like to the point.
What if person graduated from his like or her bachelor degree like really long time ago, and this person doesn't have much like relevant stuff in education, but has lots of professional experience? Would it be better to show professional experience first and then education?
That's a really good question that I can't. I would have, in my case, I would have to look at the CV and see which one really sticks out to me. But it sounds like professional experience might come before education.
And probably like for some, like it just depends on degree. Like let's say you're applying for MBA degree, it's good to show your professional stuff. Or maybe
Yeah.
you applying for some like counseling and you already worked with students, so it can be also helpful.
There's a lot of case by case
Yeah.
scenarios.
And one of my students was not students, one of my colleagues, she was applying for a master's degree in finance, but at the same time she showed that she worked for Education USA and she knows a lot about education in the United States and Kazakhstan, and plus she showed how many languages she speaks.
Mm-hmm.
Offered her, so they accepted her, and they offered her graduate assistantships in like recruitment of international students.
Yeah.
So it worked for her.
Yeah. So like I'm definitely going to have my experience with Education USA on my CV. And in my opinion, I think that's going to be it's going to be the biggest. I'm going to try to highlight that the most. Like that'll be the most relevant and most important information I can have on there.
Someone is asking, do we need to show our high school? Only undergraduate degree is enough. Yes, if we apply for a graduate degree.
Yeah. Don't include high school under your education. This kind of applies to every section. The only exception would be if you did something very, I guess, miraculous, like honors awards, volunteer work, or if you began volunteer work when you were in high school or younger and continued it on. So they don't really high school, it doesn't matter as much. I think high school is more getting into your undergraduate. In graduate school, they more care about what you did in undergraduate and in that time and beyond.
Yeah. But if you really have something that you want to highlight, like let's say a flex program, which is for high school students, but it's highly, highly selective, and it's part of State Department programs. Or maybe like I have a student, he has the first place in the International Olympiad of like physics experiments or something like that. And it was in Australia, and he got the first place. So I was like, this is something probably he could show.
Yeah. For sure. And I mean, I can't give a direct yes or no answer without actually seeing what you did in high school. But the general rule is, it's just stick with what you did from undergraduate and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Like the most relevant and recent information.
Yeah, relevant and recent information.
Guys, any questions? You know how many people, when they start writing CVs and resumes, how many people just get lost?
Mm-hmm.
No questions?
Yeah. I mean, I put my email in the chat, so you're welcome to email me with any questions. I'll be more than happy to help. And it's really helpful to look at these templates and kind of go along with what they did, because it gives you an idea how it's supposed to be structured, how you're supposed to word things of that nature. And best of luck. I mean, with going to graduate school, it's a very exciting time.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Okay. And yeah.
Thank you a lot for leading this presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad the technical difficulties weren't telling of the rest of the presentation. I was a little nervous. I got off to a rough start, but yeah, thank you so much, and everyone, I guess, have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay, yeah, take care, everyone.
Пока-пока.